week 14 of the fantasy football season, and here's a few running backs I have as sleepers this week. The first guy, Roschon Johnson of the Chicago Bears. So Johnson's still out there, surprisingly, in 77% of fantasy leagues, and I think he's going to get a decent workload. Him and Khalil Herbert splitting in this Week 14 game versus the Lions. So the last few weeks for Johnson, Week 11 at this Lion team, 6 carries, 30 yards. Week 12 at the Minnesota Vikings, 10 carries, 35 yards, 5 catches, 40 yards. So that was a nice game from Roschon Johnson. We know he's a good receiving back out of the backfield, and he's going to get his 12, 15 touches per game, I believe. So this week, definitely a tough matchup versus the Lions coming to town to Soldier Field. They give up the third least amount of fantasy points to running backs on the season. But right now, it is wide open, in my opinion, for Johnson to be the favorite and take more work from Herbert. So right now, he's available in tons of fantasy leagues, and at minimum, he's getting 10 to 12 touches in this ball game here. In deeper leagues, he's definitely a running back that I have as a sleeper this week. The next running back I have as a sleeper is Jaleel McLaughlin, Denver Broncos. So Jaleel McLaughlin, I know he's been the guy phased out over the last few weeks for this Bronco team, but he's an explosive playmaker as well, where he's got home run ability, and he could take a screen or just a short pass and burn this defense and find the end zone. So like I said, the last few weeks, numbers are way down. Week 11 versus Minnesota, 5 catches, 14 yards in that game. Week 12 versus Cleveland, he didn't do anything, 2 carries, 4 yards. And then last week, Week 13 at the Texans, 4 carries, 15 yards. And he had 2 catches, 6 yards. So this week, a good matchup at the Chargers and a potential shootout where the Chargers give up the 11th most fantasy points to running backs on the season. So this is a big game for both teams. Broncos 6-6, Chargers 5-7 going into this week's ball game. And something's got to give. And we know with this Bronco team in their passing game, it's pretty much been the running backs catching the football out of the backfield. And obviously, Courtland Sutton being the number one target. So McLaughlin available in 89% of fantasy leagues. And I think he's a running back that could be a decent sleeper option this week. And the third and final running back I have as a sleeper is Chase Brown of the Cincinnati Bengals. So Chase Brown, he got some decent work in that Week 13 victory at the Jacksonville Jaguars. 9 carries for 61 yards, so he was finding holes. He was showing his speed, and this kid could be the next running back in the next couple years if Joe Mixon obviously loses it, and he's got a lot of miles on his body, and he's up there in age. But in terms of this week, it's a good matchup on paper versus the Indianapolis Colts. I give up the 4th most fantasy points to running backs on the season. Chase Brown available 96% of fantasy leagues. I know it's a deep dart throw and sleeper option, but you never know if they're going to want to just keep running the football a whole lot. They're going to need a second guy in there because he's going to get more work, obviously, where they're trying to run the football heavier with Joe Burrow out for the season, even though Jake Browning, we saw, was a capable quarterback. So Chase Brown, he's going to get some carries. You need a dart throw and a sleeper in the deepest of leagues. He's won this week, so that's a few running backs I have as sleepers for Week 14 of the fantasy football season.